7 o'clock, and I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order on Wednesday, September 18th. I have with me in the room Dean Hodis, Maury Creighton, Tom Parkins, Peter Twining, and myself, Sarah Mellish, and on Zoom is Andy Olderman and Mike Pratt. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yep, here, thank you.
Great, okay. So the first item on the agenda is to discuss the budget book format. I want to give some input to Andrea before it's too late, in case she needs to have them change the print format. So I think we kind of struggled with it when we were going through the budget. I think that the budget book has two purposes. One is to be a general introduction for both the select board and the finance committee. And then the other is for us to use for the actual review of the budget. So I don't know if people have thoughts. You know, I kind of I'm thinking there almost needs to be two. One for the original with all the bar graphs and stuff, and then maybe one for us to work off without all of the pictures. I don't know.
I'm gonna ask that the capital budgets be, to the extent possible, put with the operating budget, so when you're working on, say, DPW, when you flip the page, you're looking at the capital budget that they're asking for, or the library, or whatever it may be. At least in my clumsiness, I found it awkward to always pick out what was happening in the capital, which is, I know, separately reviewed, but at the same time, very relevant to that review of that department. I know it can't be perfect, but I
would agree with that. The other one is from revenue. Sometimes
Yes.
the revenue for various departments is buried in government, or so, you know, for example, like beach revenue would be good to have referenced on the beach pages.
Or the Parks and Rec, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I had that comment as well, that it'd be nice to see what the revenue is associated with the operating budget.
Okay. Because I think it's shown by where it's collected.
that's right.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Which is how she does the books. Anything else? I was kind of confused as we went along. If I can find one. There were kind of times when there was a total and then there were subtotal sections, and I found that confusing. And I don't know if that's a function of,
Well, like DPW had trash collection and sanitation, and then there were like a couple of different subtasks. That was,
Is that what you mean? Sarah?
trying to find what was confusing me so much. It seemed to me that we had one page and then a second page. I guess it was the breakdown between the various within a department, yeah, that had the total at the front. And I guess that's because that's how we actually put the budget on the warrant.
Sort of warrant driven as opposed to sometimes managerial.
Okay.
Mechanics.
Oh, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so as you know, I've been trying to use the digital format the last couple of years since they've been offering it. And I find that, you know, the bar charts and all that kind of stuff, the pie charts, they're initially, you know, sometimes interesting to look at, but I would love to be able to not see them generally, you know, so we can just, you know, kind of, because cutting to the chase is just being able to look at the, you know, the spreadsheet, the tables that have all the numbers in them. And then I was going to also say, ultimately, if we have, you know, these different thoughts, it'd be useful to, if we could get, you know, Andrea to participate in a meeting, and, you know, because she's the one that inputs all that stuff, and she manages the ClearGov stuff. I think the books now come, they're printed out from the ClearGov site.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so what do we need? Hi, Ann. What do we need after the initial budget presentation for changes? What format do we want those changes in? We want a spreadsheet? Do we want PDFs of the ClearGov? What do we want?
We've been getting like updated spreadsheet, like toward the end where we get the final reconciliation and the articles and stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, my concern is that I don't think it's updated as frequently as our meetings.
Right, to get the latest from the
I mean,
spreadsheet.
if we were working in a paper world, we get updated pages.
Right.
That we can staple into the existing
Right.
one. I find, I've done it both ways, electronically and page wise. I find electronic helpful to skim through really quickly.
Yeah.
But very hard to update.
Okay,
And I think
yeah, I can't
mean,
make
what-
notes in it.
I think one of the problems we've had with capital and other things is, you know, if you're revising a document, you need a really good revision system, like an engineering revision system. And it's really, I think it's very easy to say, okay, in January, on the 20th, we updated the electronic version. On February 2nd, we updated it again. But, oh, we backed out these numbers and something we thought we hadn't done before it's changed. And gets crazy complicated. And we get to that last meeting or two before we go to print. And Gail or Greg is holding us to the fire going, now, we still need to revote this and we still need to revote that. We're all like, remind us of the numbers again. It gets a little.
No, I agree.
little
Especially the numbers as
circuitous.
revised once or twice and rethought.
Right.
So-
Every time a document gets touched, it needs to be noted.
So we want updated PDFs with a summary of changes?
So that would be easy to just staple
Okay.
into our program table.
Or just look at them online?
I know Andy, who operates off his tablet, may have trouble with that.
On the online ones, would you have the original and then a revised page, or would just substitute it out and make the change? I like put an R on the,
Where are you accessing the online? Are you going into ClearGov or are you using the PDFs?
Usually I'll go to ClearGov.
Okay,
Yeah,
can you see the changes?
no,
No, okay,
no, it's not evident. There's no chain of custody for changing.
It's
Okay.
just a new rev. I mean, you look at it compared to the old one, you might have printed out and say, oh, they've changed or they haven't changed. That's how it's.
You gotta catch it.
maybe you put a rev and a date with the page number, when they,
Changes in color or something to get a little more
okay.
noteworthy.
Series 2.1, series 2.2, series 2.8, just keep out.
I guess the question might be to Andrea, is there some sort of a similar kind of notation and formatting approach in accounting? You know, for tracking changes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's running everything on a spreadsheet,
Yes.
which I like. And then it's my understanding, then she uploads the spreadsheet to ClearGov. I have the process correct.
and it just automatically goes to the right pages, or the spreadsheet is the,
I think the spreadsheet's the underlying database.
right, and it just populates everything.
Yeah,
So that would make the
That would
rev
work.
stuff difficult.
The advantage of that is you're looking at the spreadsheet, you can save a prior rev and pull it up if you need to. Right, makes it a little easier. And then for quick math, it's always nice when you're working the spreadsheet to go, well, that number just changed. I wonder what it looked like relative to last year. You just find an empty cell and run your quick little math on it.
I think she has a comments column.
Okay.
So she might be able to put in the comments column things that have changed or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes,
Okay,
and particularly if the previous year when is itself being recast slightly, the comments could include a reference to any changes that have some implication in terms of the numbers we're working for last year. Because I find sometimes even during the year that there's some we find that number gets refreshed and revised slightly, I believe. So I do find it confusing as we look back on the prior year, I'm sure I understand what the number was.
Yeah, I think she has something, a spreadsheet where she has the original appropriation for a year, and then she has amendments that happen at subsequent town meetings. And
I
the
may not be
total.
focusing on that, but I find it confusing.
Okay,
And there are other things, just as I get familiar with income operations, keeping track of what 1% of the tax rate is worth. I mean, some benchmark items, I know they get mentioned, but they keep getting asked because people like me forget them. Where we are with free cash, where we are with reserve, I know it gets announced.
her spreadsheet has all those tabs.
Right,
I don't know if she doesn't update reserves as we're going through the reserves are updated in a weird way. Because they're updated as of July 1st, based on what we voted at an April town meeting for the next year. So she's not giving us we don't get an end of the fiscal year reserve number, and that's because the July 1st is what has to be certified by the state. Yeah. So I find that confusing
I do too.
because it's an estimate.
I mean, if reserves were almost on like a trial balance, it's another little cell, just,
Yeah,
it's not we're holding you to it, but it just helps us understand where all this rolls to. But I don't know, they finally count principles. She might not like that.
I suppose it depends on whether she could have a separate tab on her worksheet that carries that. I know that sometimes she's had separate tabs for,
It is really complicated because it pulls from all sorts of different places and different
Yeah.
ways.
yeah,
There's capital that's been the stuff that's carried over. It's all of the labor. It's wonderful. Yep.
right. That I find very confusing. Okay. I'll sit down with her and kind of see what kind of input she has, since she's the one that has to do it for us, but I just think it's, we need more updated changes.
Yeah.
But we get confused. Okay. Did you have any comments on that, Mike?
Nope, just taking it all in.
Okay. Just making sure you're awake.
Yep, thank you, checking on me.
Well, Mike.
I mean, I will say this.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of like I think Maury said, the beach thing, but any department where there's like an inflow, a revenue and an outflow, having those both on the same page. Like I even think of the parking clerk thing. Like I think I bring it up every year. It'd be nice to know, how much the parking clerk brings in revenue on the same page that we see how much we spend on it, just so that we know if it's like, right, net
Yeah.
positive cash flow, so beach revenue, ticket revenue, I can't think of all of them, but
Okay. Yeah, I think I think it's a challenge for her, because I think she carries her books differently. I think the question is how can we get what we need without making it be a major.
like the harbor would be another one, right? Where, because like on the one hand, you're looking at how much, we spend on, right, that department, but then there's all the fees, right? There's the mooring fees and the DACWA fees, and I can't even think of all of it, but same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you worked with Harbor last year, right, Peter? Are the harbor fees going into the the waterways fund, or does that only occur at town meeting?
Don't have a clear answer, because I think some of the harbor fees are handled in different ways.
Okay,
I think mooring fees are handled in one way, and other fees, such as the dockage fees, are handled in a different way. So I don't have a clear, maybe Ann, you do, but I don't have a clear sense in the answer to your question.
Certainly, the launch service is kept completely separate.
Yep.
And I think that the dockage is also, it's certainly accounted for separately because, before encouraging him to put out more floats, we wanted to know exactly how much he took in and exactly how much he spent on people who were at the dock. But it may be that Bion keeps those numbers separately for himself.
Yeah.
So I would check with Andrea.
okay,
I think one of the things I've always had a brain cramp on is harbor revenue or mooring fees, and if at all, how they're applied to harbor staff. And I always struggle with, is that, what's that crossover? Because there's sort of like, you know, we hear about mooring fees being put away for dredging and other things, and yet we also hear self-funded harbor, and I always struggle with where all these buckets are.
we don't see the mooring fees in our revenue number,
Right,
right? I don't think the mooring fee was shown.
Let's see.
Why not?
I thought the mooring fees.
I'm just saying, I don't think it's in the information in the budget book.
Yeah, no, and I'm agreeing with you like it should be, right? I mean.
Right, agree, right,
So do you see the revenue from,
our tax.
Yep, yes, yes, we do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's a separate line item on the accounting records. And I think that's because there's something to do with state reporting.
the same tax on boats?
No, that's a personal property tax.
It gets swept into.
It's personal property, I think.
I think that's right.
Excise.
So
Does it-
excise taxes on boats get swept into kind of the big bucket of excise taxes along with cars and everything
I
else.
don't know.
But where you can see it is in the finance committee report and the budget, where it tells you waterways fees were used for this much of this and this much of that.
But it doesn't tell you what goes, we never see what goes into the waterways. I think is what we're saying. I'm looking at budget. Yeah, and I don't see any revenue shown under.
Every now and then we get a spreadsheet of like the reserve account and what contributes into it. And I thought I saw different things earmarked and put on there, but I don't think it's in the budget book. It was like an updated spreadsheet.
Right, that's in like the quarterly report.
Yeah.
The ongoing, the budget is really supposed to be just a summary of the prior year with the proposed budget for the current year. And then there's a lot of other information we need to look at. Okay. So I'll try to figure out what the best way is to get that kind of information. So we have it going forward. Okay. I don't promise that I'll solve all our issues, but I'll work on it.
so just as a quick, I just looked this up very quickly, boat excise is listed separately. And in,
Not in the budget.
no, but as a revenue source, it's about 14,800.
Is that her spreadsheet? Yeah,
Yeah, this is the one we got
Yeah.
a meeting or two ago. So it's about 14,800, which is significantly a small part of what the harbor mooring
right.
is on a regular basis. So I'm not sure where the mooring number or where it's presented.
Five lines of figure.
Okay. I'll see what we need to do to get some of that type of information. It may be a separate document or something. Well, you know, depending on. Okay. We finished with the budget components? Okay. For this meeting? Next topic on the agenda is to discuss the MBTA Communities Act fiscal analysis. We looked at it some at the last meeting. Maury was gonna do things.
I think, Sarah, you and I were gonna sit down and do something between now and my recollection was like October 10th.
Okay,
And the hourglass is dripping sand, but we need to get on this.
okay. We did a fiscal analysis for the SLB project. Right?
Pick that up.
Right, which was off of number of bedroom units, estimated number of people, and number of students per current residence, and then extrapolated into the guesstimate of how many new students it would be. When I look at the rate of change analysis, there are a relatively small number of new units projected to be in the downtown area. I think there's only one,
Like
One of
Elm Street and
11
Newport
units.
were the two big.
yeah.
Yeah, the C Street one stands out.
Well, so it seems to me that if we, for the in-town units, since the state is assuming 1,000 square feet, that if we look at these properties and then try to figure out how many units there might be. I mean, my feeling is if you're talking a potential of a small number of new units in the downtown area, there's really not gonna affect the expenses. The one that's gonna affect it is the Beaver Dam Road.
You're not talking about schools here, you're just talking about
Units.
I'm talking about based on the small number of additional units in the downtown area.
Right.
That's not really gonna impact the schools. By the time you do your calculation of the new units and the number of potential students, and the fact that for the most part, our classes are undersized.
I was left, this is probably what you're saying, but I'm not quite understanding. When we did the SLV calculation, I had a translation, or you all had a translation of how many would be 3-bedroom units or 2 or
Right.
1-bedroom.
Right.
I'm missing that
Okay,
translation.
so in the compliance model, they're assuming 1,000 square feet per unit. So I think if we can kind of figure out how many new units are in the various places in this downtown area, and if the average is 1,000 square feet, it seems to me you're really talking 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Is that the average or the minimum?
No, the calculation is based on 1,000 square feet. So if you have a 2,000 square foot building now and you're adding 1 unit, you're adding a 1,000 square foot unit. If you're completely redoing a unit, then maybe you've got a total of 3,000 square feet or 4,000, and then you can split it up into different size units if you so desire. And of course, you can build a larger building if it meets,
Setbacks.
setbacks and coverage.
Yeah.
But I don't think we wanna go there.
I
think that's too complicated.
yeah,
I agree. I was wondering if you could go there.
I think it's, it's complicated and frankly, I think it gives you bad. An unlikely result.
Right. And unfortunately, this preliminary report did not have any timeline to it. You're attempting to get a timeline. But I think reality is nothing's gonna be a super quick
In
timeline.
fact, there was a timeline discussed in the last meeting that I thought made a great deal of sense. I think maybe more you put it forward, like the first 3 years or like 10%, or, I mean, there was some, you had a
20 or
easy-
25 years and then
something,
25% for the first 10 years.
something like that, yeah.
This act mandates this being completed by the end of the year,
The zoning.
the zone.
Zoning needs to be in place. Well, we need to pass it by the end of the year. Then the state has to approve it. I haven't really heard what the timeline is for state approval.
What I was reading was
It has to be approved by the Attorney General
compliant
and
by the end of the year, which I'm not sure.
we have,
We have to have passed it. We're not going to be penalized for the fact that the state takes a while to review our results. We shouldn't start building, and offering permits
we can't.
based on,
We can't because all zoning changes have to be approved by the Attorney General's office before they're in effect. So presumably the Attorney's General office will work with the EOLCD, whatever the name that is. And so the Attorney General won't approve it till the other entity has approved it. So I don't expect it to be super fast. Sometimes it takes us 5 or 6 months.
So we're not staring down a big deadline.
Our deadline is to get it passed. And in order to have it come before town meeting, we need to have done the fiscal analysis and have made that available to the public in advance of any voting.
But the reality is the state's dealing with like 171
Hundred
communities.
seventy-seven.
And they're a little backed up on this.
already.
They're doing some.
And our town meeting in April of '23, we didn't get approval for the zoning changes from the Attorney General until September 29th. And that was just normal year. So they're not super fast.
So we're not looking at the sudden influx of students in September of 25.
No,
You'd be surprised if it was 28 or 29 before we really saw any influx from this?
yeah, I think that, there's, I have a house that's gone up next to me. That was 2.5 years from the time they closed until the time they moved in. So building's not super fast.
How many kids did they bring?
0. So I think the house on the other side of me sold in September of '23. And they hope to have it done in 2020, the end of 2025. So building takes a long time.
Yeah, I think it depends on what building, there are places around town where people are bulldozing down, I call perfectly good houses and building big, huge monstrous things. And they take 2 or 3 years and there's a lot of equipment.
Right.
But if you go in other areas, it is remarkable how quickly they do stuff. Like, for example, on Pine Street.
Yep,
That happened really quickly. And
wasn't it close to a year though?
was it? I
Yeah.
thought it was like.
Is this the one where they first built a huge garage and then built the house?
Right.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
sold it, they
They
sold it,
sold it,
and they ended up having to rip out the whole insides.
Right.
Um,
I mean, you probably have a better idea on the permitting side of the whole thing, but you have to start with permitting and then, and these are all distributed through the community. So,
Right.
for the most part, it's 1,000 feet here and 1,000 feet
Well,
there and,
And,
it's.
Who's gonna be the developer?
right, and you need the site plan review from the planning board.
It's a developer,
That's
it could even
couple of
be-
months.
It could even be the homeowner.
Right, right,
So in these cases, it could be very much be the homeowner as opposed to some big entity out
Right.
from the farm.
Yeah. certainly the in-town ones.
This has to be within a half mile walking distance of the.
No,
No, it doesn't.
Hmm.
There's-
18.6 acres.
One of the-
Well, it's 50% has to be within a
About
half mile.
14 has to be within the circle.
Yeah.
A little over 14, and the rest can be anywhere in town. The task force has chosen to put all but 7 acres inside.
Yeah.
Well, there are pieces that kind of sneak over the edge, but, so we are well within the requirements for locality of the train station.
And the assumption is on the Beaver Dam Road one, the zoning has a cap of 100 units. So this report assumed that 100 units could be built there. And it was, yeah, it would seem to me that we would want to assume a mix of units there similar to what was at SLV. I mean, that seems to me realistic.
You just said something very important. We have to make some assumptions here, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Because I looked at Beaver and I wondered at what assumption, I mean, what's, is it just arbitrary? I mean, how do, you're gonna apply SLV ratios, I gather.
Well, that's, I think, typical of a large apartment complex.
Yeah, I'd agree with Sarah on that. I mean, whatever we assume for SLV, I think it was was it like 130 units. I know it was like a
Yeah.
little more, but high level, like I'm fine with what we assume for that because, you know, yeah, I know what we did on that one. So
Yeah, for SLV, we started with 151 units and then they reoriented it down to, I think, 137.
36.
136, okay, and then there were a certain number of 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bedroom, so we ratioed out 2 bedrooms and 3. Mark, well, when I went through it,
Yeah,
was pretty
And
exhaustively.
made an assumption, and your assumptions,
I think we came up with about 90 to 92 students in the system.
and your
And then-
assumptions were slightly different than what
We were pretty
this,
concerned.
the RKG of Newton had.
Yeah,
Remember
well,
we
and
looked
then,
at
and then
that
the,
one?
then the builder came back and said, well, no, it's gonna be 7 students. So I
Right.
figure we pin the ends of the spectrum here.
right, so Maury, if you think about it, we almost came in at 1 per unit because you're averaging like, right, 1 bedroom units, 2 bedroom units, 3, but when you just when you blend it all, right, our numbers came up with almost 1 per unit on the average, high level average, right?
It wasn't
think
that
it
high.
wasn't that high. I think we took 1 bedroom units off the list. And then we did a ratio of 2 bedrooms.
We assumed,
And then 3
50
bedrooms, we assumed more kids.
we assumed 50 new students.
50
Assumed
out of
317 new residents, and based on the percentage of students we have today, we assume 50 new students.
50 students out of, what was it, 130 roughly?
136 units.
Okay, so actually I'm wrong, so it's more
Oh, no,
like,
this was actually done based on the 157 units. Not the
Right.
136.
It was-
that sounds low.
So we would come in with less than 50. And of course, there's a huge difference between SLV, which was a project before us, and a Beaver Dam property, which
So SLV had
who
a
knows whether
definitive.
the property owner wants to sell. Right?
Right. Yeah, yes, they're closer to reality and some of the assumptions are understood, but.
Yeah.
I'm still left a little bit, I guess we just simply, again, as you say, create ratios, but I don't know how many units. So you take the limit to 100
The
units,
max is 100.
so do you assume that they're 1,000 foot or 2,000, how do you know?
I'm suggesting that we use the same blend of units as SLV did. Between studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. Because they're not, the developer would not be restricted
Mhm.
as to the size of the units. They're capped on the number of units
This is Beaver Dam.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for Beaver Dam.
right. But for the rest of the town, I think we talked last meeting that it's so distributed amongst the existing housing stock, we were gonna just like linearize it off the population. Because, you know, by the time you go down C Street, go down Union and figure out this is 900, this is 400, it would be immensely complicated. You could do it, but given time and resources, I think you maybe would do this.
Can we express that again?
So
Give me a little more concrete example of what you're saying, so I can see it.
So for these proposed zoning changes, which would affect the current density of housing in town. Rather than try and go after every single unit and figure out there's 400 feet here, would that be a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom? You just do it on population.
Do it calculated on the number of new expected units
And
versus the existing number of dwelling units.
Right.
And using that ratio to determine how many students there might be.
So.
it's like a top-down approach as opposed to.
So it's
bottom-up.
irrelevant what the size
Would
is.
be- There's, I don't know, 125 or something here or something.
I'm excluding Beaver Dam. I'm
Oh,
looking at
excluding
the
Beaver
other
Dam.
small number.
Okay, so assume that number's 35, I've forgotten it now,
34.
34, okay, and you'd compare that to the town in general?
The 2,350
Okay.
odd units we have. And say we have X number of students for the current dwelling units. How many new students would there be for the new dwelling
I
units?
now see what you're
Add
saying.
34 units to the.
Ratio.
Yeah,
That's all you can do in planning, estimate.
Yeah, extrapolating it.
now do we
Yeah,
do that
I
for
wasn't
Beaver
quite
Dam
sure
Road
what-
also and not try to figure out the size of the units?
I think Beaver Dam could potentially have
Yeah.
more students
That's what I
than that
think.
number because they're designed as multi-bedroom
Right, yeah,
types of units.
okay,
Now, the one thing we did for SLV though, I think is we took the total school budget.
Yep.
Divided by the number of students and came up with
in
the cost.
Manchester,
per
yes,
student.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now, that was pretty much higher than everyone else's, because there's this
Right.
efficiency factor. If we come up with any reference on whether to use 75% or maybe on this one.
well, you're right, the Newton one used a percentage, right?
Yeah, it was pretty low, it was like 63 or something.
And there was a little bit of wrangling about whether we look at just operating or whether we look at operating in debt,
Just operating,
right?
I
So
think,
Why
it's-
did
it's
we
the
look at
old-
debt? Why did we not
Well,
add debt to that? Sarah?
Because we're not.
Because it was like
available.
the argument about
irrelevant.
incremental adds. So if you already have a class of, 16 students, a 17th isn't gonna make a whole lot of difference.
Not gonna add to capital, yes.
But
and you could also make the assumption, which I don't think we wanna go there. But you could also make the assumption, well, if you're gonna have more students in town, you're not gonna have the school choice students. Which are currently filling the classrooms, and I don't know what that's up to now, but that's almost the same number of new students as it would be.
On a more
They just
general,
increased it, I can't remember what the number is at now.
yeah, it's still low, given the experience we got into about 10 years ago, where we had almost 80
Right.
students in the system. My recollection, I can look it up, it's more like 30 at the moment.
They were adding 10 or something. Yeah, it's more than that, yeah. It was over 100 at one point,
Yeah, it's-
okay,
I believe.
That's kind of irrelevant because the choice students, they just won't take in new choice students if they're seeing a development like Beaver Dam all at once.
yeah, but what I'm arguing, Ann, is okay, if you have 100, let's say, if you're expecting 50 new students, and because you have a new development, you're gonna take in 50 less. Then you're not gonna have the incremental cost because you're just filling the seats of the school choice kids.
Yeah.
You know, but that's a little convoluted.
But at the same time, you're losing the state funding on the school choice kids.
It's only
right?
5,000 a student,
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, but you just gotta factor that into the math,
Yes.
right?
right?
Yeah, and the state's gonna be funding the districts where they have all these immigrants coming in. You're gonna favor those districts this year, I think, the funding formulas.
This
They're gonna
year.
have to.
Well, they've
So,
already announced,
what we're gonna get.
yeah, it's more.
Cause they have,
for this upcoming fiscal, we're getting more.
I see
Not a
what,
huge amount more.
But Beaver Dam isn't gonna hit Manchester for.
10 years, I bet.
the big takeaway when I read that analysis was right at the beginning, when they said by law that they're capping the number of affordable units at 10%.
Well, we're doing 20.
Okay, cause, well, they say you can do that with a feasibility analysis.
And that's one of the reports I sent you,
Yes,
was that feasibility analysis for affordable housing. And that came in that we had no issue with using the 20%.
okay, good. 'Cause
And that's what was submitted to the state on the
Excellent.
initial draft.
That's
yeah.
key, cause we don't wanna be chasing our tail with that.
Right, yeah. And that would be only applied to stuff being built of 5 or more units. Because 20% would be 1 of 5. So if it's under 5, you wouldn't get to that 20%.
And that's gonna discourage people from building 5 unit.
Exactly. So theoretically, it's pretty much Beaver Dam, and I think that there was the one by Newport Park that maybe had 11 new units, was assumed. 13, yeah.
And then, there was Elm had 10.
But those were 2 lots.
Yeah. Newport is,
2 lots also.
Newport is complicated.
Yeah, but the only assumption for new units was in those 2 lots at the front.
Ah, okay.
So those are,
And they can go to 4 stories, right? What's that?
No.
Yeah.
The 4 stories is only for actual Newport Park.
no, it isn't. It includes those 2 lots in front. That's part of the district. That's part of the sub-district. Trying to bring that with me.
I thought.
Well, we don't need to figure that out here.
You might wanna consider additional setback requirements for something that high. That's, yeah.
That's- That's not, that's not our issue.
Boy.
So what are the other thoughts on this?
Says the impact's very minimal and then quite delayed. I mean, just to put it in general terms.
I was curious on some backup, like on all those pro formas toward the end, where they just have like a lump sum for the operational costs. I'm wondering if there's some backup on, I'm trying to,
What are you talking about? I'm sorry, Dean.
okay, on the economic feasibility. the-
Newton,
Yes,
is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about for the affordable housing?
well, it's this analysis that they,
Which I sent out 2
right,
reports,
the
which
economic feasibility, not the propensity for change.
economic feasibility for affordable housing.
But yeah, that's so to speak.
Yeah,
But so they had all the pro formas toward the back with 15 units and 40 units and, but I was trying to look at like what for the DPW, are we gonna need to improve intersections or widen sidewalks or put in lights and, you know, there's just kind of lump sum numbers and I was trying to look at what might, you know, break down what some of those costs might be to throw them in there.
yeah, but I think what we're saying with this is there are so few units spread out throughout the downtown area that there wouldn't be an impact. The potential impact would be Beaver Dam Road, which is conveniently off of Atwater Road, which is being addressed by CST.
Sidewalk issue.
Yeah.
I think the value of the Newton is more about ratioing than absolute numbers. But their absolute numbers are pretty scary and they don't fit to us.
Right.
But the ratioing is.
Well, they're dealing with, the challenge with that is they're dealing with a completely different type of construction than we're talking about. You know, they've got big potential for very large developments. And we don't have that.
I think it would be helpful if you had some statement about the impact on water, sewer.
Yep.
Police, fire. Not that it
Yeah.
matters, but my guess is it's minimal in all of those.
Well, we did that for CST.
Mhm.
We met with police and fire and there was no impact
Mhm.
on their budgets, and water and sewer, DPW said there was no impact. So we just need to circle around and confirm that.
It would be,
if-
it would make people feel more comfortable if.
Yeah.
The finance committee said.
Right. Yeah.
You concurred with people who might have a might have a professional interest in.
Right.
So just on Ann's point, impacts on water, sewer, police, fire, DPW and school. Those seem to be the columns.
Hmm.
Can
People
anybody
might-
think of
might
any
like to
others?
hear, as have been mentioned, just say something about traffic. The need for additional traffic control.
Not sure there would be a DPW impact, but possibly depending on where the development is, if they need some sort of, sewage ejector kind of, lift station to tie into the town system, which presumably would be installed by the developer, but would then become a DPW maintenance item.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, to that, but I think you gotta have some kind of assumed, it's a very high level back of the envelope, but right, you gotta factor something in there, right? Cause
As I recall on the SLV, and I can double back around, as I recall on the SLV, they were responsible for that and they were responsible for the maintenance. That the town was on the pumper thing, whatever it was. The town was only responsible for the pipes in the street.
Yeah, that was a waste treatment facility of some kind that I think they owned as part of their design. But I
That's
do,
the same thing you're talking about, or something different?
it's something different. It's, it's like over on, Pine Street near, what is it, Rockledge or something like that. I think there was a project recently that added a generator out there, to support the lift station that's there.
Oh, Rockwood Heights, okay,
Yeah, Rockwood Heights, yeah.
okay,
So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about.
okay.
So it's not time.
They were, they were.
Well, at one point, there was.
But CST definitely is.
Yeah,
you
but
know,
that's
under-
not residential. So, but I can ask Chuck,
Yeah.
do you need another one of those things you got over at Rockwood Heights? A lift station. At least it sounds, I know what I'm talking about.
You nailed it. It's good.
Thanks, Andy.
Well, as an aside, one thought I had on the sewer situation, because I don't think we bid the sewer reconstruction yet. The repairs that we were planning to do this year. I didn't see anything bid, and they were talking about, again, relocating it with some injector system. This is something that Greg said in the cricket the other day.
Oh, that's years and years down the
Right,
road.
but well, one of the thoughts I had is it might be prudent to do that with the CST to keep the capacity this for the rest of the town. And just to keep, but that's a different.
That's different,
But it was a thought I had.
the report that was done, and I will re-verify it with Chuck, said that there was sufficient capacity in our existing system.
But they were also looking to relocate the whole system. And I was thinking,
Yeah, but that's a whole different,
Yeah.
That's a flooding problem.
that's
Pumping
not,
problem.
well,
It's a
Yeah.
huge capital project.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with this zoning. That's a completely separate
yes, I did see.
issue that impacts the town. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, we'll have to meet more
So
soon.
let's get on this.
Okay. Hasn't been on my high-speed burner. Okay. Next was to discuss the liaison role and if there's any updates.
Thank you very much, this is my pleasure.
Thanks, Ian, for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate your input.
That's so rare.
So, Peter and I had set a date to meet with, Chuck. I think it was it the 25th?
9 o'clock, 25th here.
It's an update.
Yeah, and I wanna
But
make,
yeah, I'd like to discuss
Yeah.
your cautionary notes here.
yes. I think that Greg is working on a facilities plan.
Yes.
At our next meeting on October 2nd, he's presenting his long-term capital plan to us.
With respect to facilities.
Facilities and everything else.
Well, everything else.
Right, long-term capital plan. This is the bigger projects. This isn't the routine stuff.
This isn't pipes, this is.
Right. There should be the facilities, the climate resilience stuff, what other
When is that
categories?
happening?
October 2nd. Yeah. That's when we're gonna start that discussion.
Somehow I missed that particular, that upcoming event. Okay, yep.
Well, I'll,
Formally announced.
to be honest, Greg and I had a conversation on the side.
Okay.
And he said he couldn't make this meeting, so I said, well, we'll do this other thing, and then he said, well, I'll be ready to give you the capital on the meeting on the 2nd.
Well, I gathered from your comments that you were really focusing us towards, at least at this early stage, towards the process. It was more of a process question of how cost numbers are developed for projects. Am I missing your?
Right, in the capital budget, because I think the thing that surprised me when we were doing last year's budget is we came up with this conversation of, do we hire a person to be clerk of the works? And when we did that, they removed $400,000 from the capital projects budget to hire outside consultants to do
Yes.
the projects.
Yes.
And that seemed like a very large number to me and made me wonder, what's the methodology actually calculating what we're carrying in the capital budget for the projects? Is it a developed number, or is it just a stab, is this what we think we can afford?
Examples of that over and above the example you just provided, which is the supervisory element. Would be, what elements would you expect to be within that guesstimate range, like,
The water and sewer updates.
just simply in general?
Yeah, it just seems to me like there's numbers being carried for pipes, and I don't know how those numbers are being generated.
Weird
Well,
funds.
it's probably as a guess. You have initial engineering, and Andy can probably talk to this, but you have the initial engineering, you have permitting, then you have construction. Typically, you have a 30% contingency in there for construction, which is how people bid this. There's also a municipal overlay, you have a prevailing wage, and then you probably have like documentation and wrap up at the end. So when you add all that stuff together,
50%.
you start high, and then you whittle away as you get more.
I'm not even sure when they're coming up with budget numbers where they're looking at specific projects.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I
That's
mean,
another
so
question.
for instance, they had 1.8 million for Pleasant Street and,
Right. They didn't do it.
well, no, the bids are, came back at 3.1 million. Cause not only are they lining Pleasant Street, they're looking at Blue
No.
Heaven Lane and,
There's 2 years, no, the 1.8 was in the year before funding that wasn't used,
okay,
and they did Walker Road
right.
with a portion of that, and I don't know what portion. And then there was much more
There's a
in,
lot of,
there's much more in the fiscal year 25 budget. I can't remember what we had for water and pipes, but it was much higher than the 1.8 now.
well, Chuck seems very motivated and we're giving him a long leash to get going, but
I
we wanna
was-
keep him in the right direction, yeah.
With a better understanding what you're now talking about.
Yeah, I just think we need to understand how the
those
capital
numbers are
budget,
developed.
how they're developed. Yeah.
And then I think that along the way, there's discovery. You may remember on Walker Road, there was a pipe that ran diagonally under like 3 private properties. And they said, okay, we're gonna discontinue this and we're gonna route it to the corner and around. And
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with coming up with the budget, the money, the number in the capital budget.
Right.
Okay? That's an unforeseen event, which is fine, I get that. I'm just asking about how the numbers are developed for the capital budget.
Like we could suggest like looking at what the cost was for last year's water main work and how many linear feet did they put in and.
They may be doing a linear feet calculation, I
so
don't
it-
know.
Right,
Yeah,
so it's a cost per linear foot type,
but there
thing that
seems
you
to me in
can plug
DPW, there's a lot of money there. There's a pool for storm damage repair that just, for years, we were just adding to that. And there's other things in that budget, I can't remember what else.
the cringer I wanna ask about is what happened to School Street, why we have to pay that again. Oh, that's what we're like trying to avoid. but
I don't get what they're doing, why they closed one side of School Street, didn't quite understand that.
We'll see.
So that's specific to DPW. What about the other departments? Is there some kind of standardized sort of
Yeah,
process you want us
exactly,
to
that's what
follow?
I'm driving towards here, exactly, yes. would-
I think for all the apparatus, we want to get the long-term plan, what their replacement is. I think other big component is staffing. What's the staffing plan? Why is it? If they need additional staffing, in what time periods and why?
See, as I'm sitting here though, for the, at least selfishly for the fire department, chief seems like he's got that figured out. He's put some thought in. Now, I know there's some things that are coming around the bend, like OSHA requirements.
And what's he planning for that? I mean, I think the hope is that the liaisons will have discussions with these departments and then come back to the finance committee before we're in the nitty-gritty of the budget and say, okay, these are potential
Mhm.
things that need to be taken into consideration.
So a big one with the fire, I'm thinking is what's the difference gonna be when we get our second ambulance online? Is there gonna be, do you anticipate more out of town calls or more
Well,
costs and staff?
We already have it.
Well,
online.
the thing that surprised me is when I read in the paper and says we now have 3 pieces of equipment that can do ALS.
Right,
Where'd the money come from? To equip them for ALS?
so it's ambulance 1, ambulance 2, and then, right, the third was supposed to be.
No, it's not ambulance 2, it's ambulance 1. And it's that SUV,
The SUV was the addition.
and now the ladder truck I read was equipped for ALS. I think I saw something on social
That might be-
media
maybe.
that when the ladder 1 came in, it's equipped for ALS, I don't know.
Just might be the modern way of doing. But now we have 3, right?
I do think on one of the questions for the liaisons who are dealing with fire is the OSHA stuff. And a lot of the
Yep.
fire safety are recommendations, not laws. And when you talk with people in other towns who deal with fire departments, they always remind you, those are guidelines. I mean, I was sitting with a guy in Montana who's a fire chief out there and he goes, yeah, these are guidelines.
Or ideals to strive for.
Yeah. As opposed to like a big metropolitan Boston area. Where it's different.
I think the other question is on regionalization. I think certainly with police, and I can't remember who's doing police,
Mike and I,
okay.
we need to connect Mike on this. He's got
The
lots of-
Essex police chief is retiring.
Right,
And my understanding is there may have been some discussions, but there may have been reasons why Essex may not want to do it. But I think we need to understand that as to what,
So are you expecting like a written report, a verbal report?
oh, no, just verbal. Just verbal, yeah, just to discuss it in a meeting.
Andy, you and I should get together and brainstorm.
Yep, that's fine.
And Mike, you and I should have a conversation about police and coordinate on that.
Yeah, let me know.
Yep, I'll reach out to you in the next day or so on that.
Okay.
Just so that we're not at the point where I think the thing that happened this past year is the entire budget was put together. And then there were all these things that came up that significantly impacted the budget. It would be nice to have the discussions in advance of the budget being tied in a package in December to give some input.
This is separate and above from what the chief may do with Greg. Because I think he sits down.
Thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, Sarah,
yeah,
sorry. Do you have, do you end up getting any notes from the select board on, like direction that they've given to DPW regarding a new facility or, anything like that?
No.
No,
I don't get anything from the select board, but we're having a joint meeting on October 7th
that's right. Okay.
to discuss their fiscal year 26 priorities.
Okay, because, I say that because sometimes these, like the new Public Works facility, stuff like that sort of materializes because it just appears on a page somewhere.
Yep.
And, it's hard to know, like, what's the intention behind it? Is it, is it just springing from, just from DPW, or is it coming from Greg? Is it got the support of the select board? So it'll be good to have that kind of discussion.
Right, and I think that one of the things with DPW is, I don't know what the timeline is for the boring at the old compost site. Test borings.
Yeah,
That's
for geotech, you mean?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Geotech.
Yeah,
I think
I don't know
that's
if that's been done.
that the liaisons can ask about as to what the timeline is for that.
Where does the Harbor sit in all of these various inquiries in terms of DPW?
Police, we said Harbor would be with police, yeah. Because the staff is kind of
When I
intertwined.
thought about the staff, I was thinking about the other elements of Capital Harbor. In terms of sustainability. All that, I didn't know where that lay, staffing here among us. Who should be asking those questions? Who
Well,
should
I
be
think the sustainability should be in Greg's long-term capital plan. And I think that if we're not seeing stuff there, then we should be asking what the plan is of him. Because DPW isn't really sustainability and Harbor's not really sustainability. I mean, it's an overriding town effort,
Well, that's what, yeah,
right?
so I was trying to think where it.
Yeah.
Lies in Greg's review, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think so,
But to your point, a bunch of that is capital. So for example, you have the rotunda,
right,
you have dredging, you have Central Street Dam,
right.
and then we have docks and floats and capital equipment, which is, with the retiring harbor master, the next one may not be quite so handy. So these are all the capital things.
We need to
And then
get
you,
our
then you got
hands
the
around.
operational things, which is at a bump this year with the launch, which you're familiar with, and I think we want to recap of what happened
Assistant harbor master.
after that. So that's kind of the operational side, and
My
it does,
understanding is he's going to police academy.
Does that prepare for the fact that harbor masters are gonna have to be trained, fully trained officers? Is that?
They don't have to be.
I know, but
Yeah,
is that a
yeah.
projection into
I
the
think so,
future? That's
yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there's an assumption that that's gonna happen, and it's these type of decisions that have significant financial impacts, and we're not really always clued in on.
Should we look at like the cost of doing the routine patrols versus the cost of maybe just being able to handle a complaint? There's, you know, like what is the benefit we're getting from these, all the cost of having two people out patrolling every weekend for, 16 hours? Is it being worthwhile? Is it a useful expenditure? Versus if we just don't expend that money and handle it when someone calls that there's too many people in a cove or something.
I think that would be too radical a change.
To look at
Yeah,
whether we do that.
yeah. I mean, you need a presence on the streets.
In the harbor, but
That's in the harbor.
yes,
What?
you need it in the harbor, but do you need it on the whole coastline? Well, this is about the whole coast.
Well, I mean, maybe to your point about the harbor, if we have two boats with one person in each, or two boats with one and two people, that's three people, then you've got somebody on the waterfront.
Oh,
You
you're
know,
not
whether
talking
you're
about
doing
the
dog
streets,
walk,
I
I
think
mean-
he was talking about the streets.
I'm just talking about the water. I mean, on a given weekend, we might have 5 people or more
Easily.
coming and going. And, a lot of these are younger people with vacations or whatever. So now you have a backlog or a stable of another 3 or 4 that can fill in. By the time you get to it, the harbor is probably got 10 people on the payroll in some capacity here or there or more. So I think to the point, we need to be conscious about how we're getting to these places.
Right.
It's like the grant thing. Oh, I've got a grant, it's totally paid for. Well, then suddenly we're like, well, okay, how much town labor is used to execute this grant? And oh,
Or
by
how
the way,
much
the
is
grant's
that?
gone away, now are we doing for maintenance?
Yeah.
And
And what
we
is
kind of
this
get into
grant?
these things sometimes accidentally.
Yeah, so that would be another thing that liaisons can ask about is grants.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a lot of grants that the departments rely on.
Rely on, okay.
Yeah,
Not those necessarily in the pipeline, but those that they're assuming into their plans, is that?
or that they're scheduling capital projects because they assume they're gonna get a grant and it won't impact the town budget. Because,
To what effect are grants gateways to more spending?
right,
Is another way to
exactly.
think of it.
Yeah.
You know? Let's-
That's Maury just hit the nail on the head. That's how to quantify, yeah, exactly.
Anything else? Do people feel comfortable as to what?
You have a better sense from this conversation.
The good thing is we're starting early.
Right?
This is September. So, the budget gets put together and we'll see it sort of in December, but we're on it. This is good.
Right.
So,
Town meeting was later.
What is needed? This would be a slightly different question.
Yeah.
What's needed for the November town meeting? What? are we
I don't know what's gonna be on it.
Okay.
I have no clue. Well, I do have a clue,
Well, we know it's for the MBTA zoning.
Right, we do know that, yes.
but,
What else are they gonna throw in?
That's exactly.
well, there are a couple of bills that weren't paid,
Yeah,
which
okay.
will be on.
Well, there was always something. I was looking for some big, something.
I haven't heard, I thought that Greg's goal was to not have much on the warrant. Because they felt that the MBTA zoning was gonna take so much time, and so their goal was to not have a lot of things, but I haven't heard.
So if we work back from that, they need to file the warrants and all that for that probably around mid-October. Which means that it comes up for discussions, things if it has financial impact come up with us early in October and the selectmen early in October. So we ought to be asking Greg, what's on the board for this? And
So I'll put it on the October 2nd,
or 7th, Probably the
Second,
second, I would be
yeah,
asking him,
agenda
what do you
is-
anticipate coming?
We've got long-term capital and we've got potential warrant articles. Okay. Anything else you guys want on this meeting, that meeting? Okay. And then we have the joint meeting with select board on the 7th, and then we have another meeting on the 16th. Which we might circle back around based on the meeting we have with the select board. Okay. So we're done with that?
I have a feeling we're not done. It'll be around.
For this meeting. Well, I think any additional information we can solicit, the better off we are.
Say again on the select board.
I just noticed the word done, that's all.
October 7th. Yeah, we'll meet with them. I think it's a Monday.
It is.
Is
And I was
there-
not able to. be
That's
there.
right, yeah. It's a normal meeting, and so I suggested that we would be on at 7. 'Cause that's our normal time.
You'll let us know.
They start meeting at 6, they start their meeting at 6:30. And it has been added to the agenda. Cause she wanted to do it next week, Tuesday. and I couldn't do that. Okay. Minutes,
I read them.
yeah? Did you have any changes? Dean, you had some changes?
Well, just the one,
Okay.
right, that thing about the Harbor Master and water rates was at the July meeting,
Okay,
wasn't it? Or the next one.
okay.
I don't recall the discussion about Greg. Them considering Greg being town manager. I thought I would know what it thought that it was in there, so I don't know how it got added, but. It's in there as doesn't. You remember that?
I do not remember that.
Yeah.
It's the updated statement on governance. The governance was discussed, and then that's the updated statement on what's
We
going on
didn't
with,
discuss that in our meeting.
then I'll take it out.
Yeah,
You
we
didn't
didn't
discuss
discuss that
Brought it up, it was on,
administrative position might be changed to town manager.
no, you didn't discuss it.
No, please take that out. And we've had nobody's contacted us regarding a selection meeting. Committee. So I don't know what's happening there. Okay, so I make a motion to approve the September 4th meeting with those changes. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Yes.
Peter seconds. Take a vote. Peter,
Yes.
Dan, Tom. Can't believe I did that again. It's been a long time. Maury,
Yes.
Dean,
Abstain.
Mike,
I'll abstain.
Andy.
Yes,
Okay. So we've talked about the October 7th meeting already, I guess, right?
I think so.
Is there anything else we need to discuss?
Another month to be here.
Well, we have another month for
Oh,
the
yeah.
town meeting.
Yeah. Well, and maybe some of the, I've got a conflict with one of these meetings we've scheduled, so it may be we have to adjust our schedule too.
You have a sense of when that.
Yes,
I'd appreciate it.
November 20th.
That's likely to be.
That conflicts with the ZBA meeting.
Not good.
And would likely therefore.
It was our only November meeting. And I think that we had people,
Oh, I had switched.
yeah, and I wasn't astute enough to realize that. was the ZBA meeting.
So you're likely to move it to another time?
Another day,
Right,
I mean, another day rather.
back to the 13th,
which I
is that a
get.
problem?
Yeah, it's, well,
Um,
I'm away, I like,
Okay,
20th was good, actually.
how about the Tuesday or the Thursday of that week? Week of the 20th. 19th or 21st,
That's on the 21st, I can't do the 19th.
okay.
21st, 19th.
Or you can have the meeting without me.
Oh, my God.
We can't
Oh,
do
my
that.
God. I'm
Hey, that's
being
what
without
it's,
Sarah?
No, nothing.
Oh, my God.
So we're subject to November 19th.
They can't do November 21st.
Either one's good.
I can do the
Oh.
21st.
The first works for the 19th, doesn't happen.
Andy, can you do November 21st instead of November 20th? It's a Thursday.
Yes,
Mike?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So Gail will change the November 20th meeting to November 21st. Okay? She's gone. She vanished.
Next July.
If there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Peter moves. Maury seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you all.
thanks, good night.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Sir, with respect to the budget in the coming years, have you heard of any staffing changes that are likely?
Yeah. Hit the lower right hand, no, the lower right hand corner on the screen.
Screen, this,
No, up above that. Whoops.
let's go back.
Just hit the screen, yeah. End meeting for all.